What if one moment of carelessness destroyed an entire family? What if a single mistake made in seconds created an obsession that would poison 2 lives forever? And what if the man you believed was the hero turned out to be just as dangerous as the one he hated? Tonight's story begins in a world built on deception, a world of velvet curtains, hidden doors, trap mechanisms, and carefully rehearsed lies. A world where people paid not to see the truth, but to be fooled beautifully. At first, it looks like a story about magic, but it isn't. It is a story about grief, rivalry, sacrifice, and the terrifying cost of obsession. Stay with me until the end, because I will not reveal the name of the film until the final moments. And when I do, every clue will suddenly make sense. The story begins in the age of stage illusion, when theaters were filled with gaslight, applause, and wonder. In this world, magicians were not seen as simple entertainers. They were architects of impossible moments. At the center of this story are 2 young men, both learning the craft of illusion, both hungry for greatness, and both convinced they understand what it takes to amaze an audience. One of them is charismatic, elegant, and naturally theatrical. He knows how to command attention the moment he steps into a room. The other is quieter, colder, and more exacting. He is less interested in showmanship and more obsessed with perfection. One wants applause. The other wants authenticity so complete that the audience cannot even begin to understand what they have witnessed. At first, they work together, assisting a more established magician with dangerous performances involving ropes, locks, and water tanks. It is high-risk work, but controlled. Every movement has to be precise. Every knot matters. Every second matters. Then one night, a performance goes horribly wrong. A woman is lowered into a tank of water. She is bound, suspended, and meant to escape in time, just as she always has before. But this time, she cannot free herself. She drowns before anyone can save her. That moment destroys everything. Because the dead woman was not just an assistant, she was a wife. She was loved. And in the aftermath of her death, grief turns into suspicion. One man asks the other a question that will echo through the rest of the story. Which knot did you tie? The answer he receives is not comforting. It is almost worse than a confession. I don't know. Those 3 words become a wound that never heals. From that moment on, trust is dead, partnership is over, and what replaces it is more dangerous than ordinary hatred. It is obsession. The kind of obsession that does not fade with time, but sharpens. The kind that turns 2 brilliant men into enemies who can think of nothing except defeating each other. Years pass, and both men become successful magicians in their own right. But they take very different paths. One becomes a polished, dramatic performer, a man who understands that audiences don't just want mystery. They want theater. They want style. They want spectacle. The other becomes known for something more unsettling. His tricks are not always grand, but they are cleaner, tighter, and somehow more impossible. Then he unveils an illusion that changes everything. A trick so simple in appearance that it should be easy to explain, and yet so impossible in execution that it begins to consume his rival from the inside. The trick is called the transported man. The magician stands on one side of the stage. A second later, he appears on the other side. No delay, no visible passage, no obvious body double, no explanation. The audience is stunned. But hidden among them is the one man who cannot enjoy the performance. Because he understands how illusions work, and he knows that this trick should not be possible. Not like this, not so perfectly. And so, a new obsession is born. How is he doing it? At first, it looks like professional jealousy, but very quickly it becomes something much darker. The man who once wanted greatness now wants only the secret. He studies the trick, watches every movement, tests every possibility. Is it a trap door, a mirror, a hidden tunnel, a disguised assistant, a twin? Each explanation fails. And the failure begins to eat away at him. Because in this world, the man who controls the secret controls the audience the stage, and the future. The mystery is no longer just about one illusion. It becomes a question of identity. If one man can perform the impossible, then the other cannot rest until he understands how. And once that kind of need takes hold, everything else begins to lose value. The rivalry grows more vicious. It moves far beyond competition and becomes private warfare. These men do not simply try to outdo each other. They sabotage each other, humiliate each other, spy on each other. They attack not just careers but lives. Assistants become tools. Lovers become leverage. Every performance becomes a battlefield disguised as entertainment. While all this is happening, the quieter magician appears to build something like a normal life. He marries, he has a child, he tries to live as a husband and father. But there is something deeply wrong beneath the surface. His wife feels it before anyone else. Some days he is warm, loving, and fully present. Other days he feels distant, tense, almost like a stranger wearing the same face. What makes this even more painful is that he does not deny it. At one point, she asks him a devastating question. "Do you love me?" And his answer is chilling in its honesty. "Not today." That answer reveals more than it explains. It suggests that something is changing from one day to the next, something so intimate and unstable that even love cannot be trusted. His wife begins to suspect that he is hiding another life, another woman, or another part of himself. She cannot name it, but she knows she is living beside a secret. And while that marriage slowly collapses under the weight of half-truths, the war on stage becomes even more destructive. Careers are damaged, fingers are lost, innocent people are pulled into the conflict. Even the tricks themselves begin to feel crueler, less like art and more like acts of domination. Yet through all of it, the same question remains. How does the transported man work? Because by now, that question is no longer about stagecraft. It is about what these men are willing to sacrifice to become extraordinary. Then comes one of the story's most brilliant turns. A diary falls into enemy hands. One of the magicians finally gains access to the private journal of the other, believing he has at last found the key to the secret. He begins to read, expecting confession, revelation, and the final answer he has spent years chasing. At first, it seems to give him exactly that. The journal describes obsession, ambition, and a journey across the ocean to meet a brilliant inventor. A man whispered about like a myth. A man who may be capable of creating machines that border on the impossible. Suddenly, the story changes shape. It is no longer just about tricks and hidden compartments. It begins to move towards science, invention, and the disturbing possibility that maybe the impossible trick was never an illusion at all. The inventor is eccentric, isolated, and strange. He lives among sparks, coils, and machines that seem half genius and half madness. The magician believes he is commissioning a device that will allow him to equal and finally surpass his rival. But what is created is far more unsettling than expected. Not a mechanical duplicate, not a clever stage mechanism. Something that seems to reach beyond illusion entirely. And for a brief moment, the story allows us to ask a terrifying question. What if the impossible trick is not being faked? What if someone has actually found a way to do something that should not be possible? But just as the journal seems ready to reveal everything, the truth shifts again. The diary was never written to confess anything. It was written to mislead. It was bait, a trap designed for the man reading it. A performance disguised as honesty. And in that moment, the rivalry becomes even more dangerous. Because we understand that neither of these men is merely trying to win. They are trying to destroy each other completely. By now, the damage is everywhere. The women who love these men are left with betrayal, grief, and confusion. A child grows up inside the shadow of lies. Lives are split apart by ambition. The showman, still desperate to conquer the secret, finally unveils his own version of the transported man. And this time, it is larger, more theatrical, and even more astonishing. He steps into a machine. Electricity floods the room. The audience watches in breathless silence, and in an instant, he appears somewhere else entirely. across the theater, impossibly far from where he began. The crowd erupts. To them, it is a miracle. But the audience only sees what happens in the light. They do not see what happens below the stage. They do not know what is hidden in the darkness beneath the applause. That is what makes this part of the story horrifying. The trick works. Night after night, it works. The audience cheers louder. The legend grows. The mystery deepens. But each performance carries a cost that no one in the theater can imagine. At this point, the story no longer asks which man is more talented. It asks which one is more monstrous. The man who built his life on deception so complete it invaded his home and marriage? Or the man who accepted something far more terrible in exchange for glory? The truth finally arrives in layers, not as one answer, but as several. One hidden beneath another. One secret nested inside a deeper secret. And when the final revelations come, every strange detail we have been carrying begins to lock into place. The quieter magician was never one man. He was two. Twins. Two brothers sharing a single identity, a single career, a single public life. They took turns being the same person. They divided everything between them, including sacrifice. One loved the wife, the other loved someone else. One could answer truthfully when asked, "Do you love me?" The other could also answer truthfully, "Not today." That is why his behavior changed. That is why the marriage felt unstable. That is why the transported man looked impossible. It was not a machine that created the illusion. It was an entire life built around secrecy and discipline so extreme that two men became one public self. The trick was not just a performance. It was a lifelong sacrifice. Half a life each, half a self each. Every clue had been there from the beginning. The inconsistency, the tension, the divided affection, the impossible precision. The answer was never under the stage. It was inside the man himself. But that is only half the truth. The rival's secret is darker still. The machine built by the inventor did not simply move him from one place to another. It created a duplicate, a real duplicate. Every time he performed the trick, one version of him appeared in the new location, while the other dropped into a tank below the stage and drowned. Every night, the audience saw triumph. Every night, one man took a bow, and every night, another version of that same man died in darkness. This means the most disturbing question in the entire story was present all along, even before the final reveal. When he stepped into the machine, which man was he going to be? The one in the spotlight, or the one in the box? That is what obsession turned him into. A man willing to gamble his own existence for applause. A man so consumed by rivalry that he accepted murder as part of performance, even if the victim was himself. Suddenly, everything becomes clear. This was never simply a story about two rival magicians. It was a story about two different kinds of sacrifice. One man sacrificed identity, the other sacrificed humanity. And by the end, both of them lost everything. The movie you've just experienced is The Prestige, released in 2006. Directed by Christopher Nolan and starring Hugh Jackman, Christian Bale, Michael Caine, Scarlett Johansson, and David Bowie. This film hides its truth in plain sight. It does not merely surprise you with a twist, it teaches you how to look away from it. From the very beginning, it explains that every magic trick has three parts: the pledge, the turn, the prestige, and while the audience thinks they are waiting for the final reveal, the real trick is that they have already been misdirected from the start. Did you guess the movie before the ending? At what point did you figure it out? Was it the knot, the diary, the strange shifts in behavior, or the horrifying realization of what the machine was really doing? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more unforgettable movie mysteries told like stories, subscribe to The Ninth Reel.